Welcome, welcome, welcome. You're listening to the Ask Brien radio show on KHTS 1220 in 98.1 FM. Well, every week we have a show. We've been doing this show. Our pilot was back in December of 2016. That's 7 years ago. And we had started the show first week in January 2017. And we've been running ever since. Every Thursday, 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we have a show called Ask Brien. Ask Brien is a business show where we try to bring on people to either teach you about something about business, or just a founder or creator who has done something with business to try to create success. Now, at the moment, we do have a small technical issue, but it's not going to affect our show. But my co-host, Tracy, is unavailable. However, every week, people want to know, why is Ask Brien spelled Askbrien? Because most people say when they went to school, Brien was spelled Brian or Bryan. Why is it spelled Brien? I mean, they may have said, well, you know, I occasionally go down to the pub, and that's O'Brien's, and they have a nice chaser of beer or whatever they have there. And so I go there, and St. Patty's Day, I always see a lot of O'Brien's. But why is your show called Ask Brien, Brien? And there are a lot of reasons why we have an E in Brien. One of which is the way our show is conducted each week. We use an engineer, and she is handling the entire operation here. She's in charge. She tells me what to do.
Well, I try.
And I never listen.
Within reason.
But nobody's ever... I've never listened to anyone. You know, my mom said this. Anyone says this. I don't... Yeah, right.
That doesn't surprise me, yeah.
Exactly. Also with an E, exactly. So, one of the reasons why we have Ask Brien, besides the engineer, is we do try to educate people each week. So we may have somebody on a Facebook expert. We may have, like today, we have the parallel economy. Not to get confused with the parallel universe. Oh, sorry. So we've got a lot of reasons why we have an E. But also, you know, as a radio host, I am very, very, very enthusiastic and excited for our show. And having said that, I did miss one E, which I should have used before I started getting excited with enthusiasm, which was empathy. Because we do try to empathize with others. We're empathizing right now, where our technical gear is just... Can you have a blah, blah, blah? No, you don't have a blah, blah, blah.
Let's see.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's
that
our
works.
technical stuff. We're going to get a call out to somebody in the KHTS technical department. We also have a lot of other reasons. We have experts. Everybody that's on our show is an expert. Well, what does that mean? Well, we used to do, when we started out the show, we said we wanted somebody that has 5 years experience. So we calculated that out. We said if you're working 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 2,000 hours. For 5 years, that's 10,000 hours. We decided, you know what? 10,000 hours. After you've worked 5 years at anything, you pretty much know it pretty well. My first 5 years as a lawyer took me a while to get everything down, but after 5 years, yeah, I learned new stuff. But reality-wise, 95% of what I know, I learned in my 5 years. I occasionally learn new things. And for most businesses, most professions, if you do something for a 5-year time frame, or in this case, 10,000 hours, which is not always the same. For instance, anyone who here is an entrepreneur, another E, realizes that they're not going to get 10,000 hours in 5 years, because if they did, they'd be working so slowly that they couldn't pay their rent. But the reality is, as an entrepreneur, you have to be on top of things, and you probably are going to accomplish that goal probably in 2 to 3 years. So it's a much, much quicker process. And then my co-host, who still is out of control and out of the office, she loves that from the TV show or movie, Grease Lightning. And she goes, Grease Lightning is electrifying. That's right. And she also was in Georgia and East Coast, so I can say electrifying like an Alabaman. Anyway, now, without any further ado, that means without any other interruptions or explanations, we're going to go in and speak to our guest today. David, are you there?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Great, classic. So, well, first let's go a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into your company and what you're doing. So, can you give the audience a little bit of your background? I don't need from the time you were in diapers, but, basically your business experience.
Yeah, I'm a native Angelino. I grew up here in Los Angeles. I went to Loyola High School, and then for my undergrad, I went to Claremont McKenna, where I did economics and classics, and then I actually lived abroad for about 10 years, mainly in Asia, and I worked in finance and on CNBC's Squawk Box Asia, which was a fun time, and then I got my master's in public policy at the Lee Kuan Yew School in Singapore, and then I ended up back here, where I went to work for Live Nation on the North America Festivals team, which was a lot of fun. And I learned quite a lot about the sort of the economics of festivals, which is a little bit different than what one might think. And then a few years ago, I became part of this team that became what is now called Defeat the Mandates, which organized the big Defeat the Mandates rallies in D.C. in January of 2022 at the Lincoln Memorial. And then a few days after that, mandates started coming down, even in D.C. And then we did another big one in L.A. And we had lots of other things we were doing, some smaller events. And then last March in Atlanta, we produced the first COVID litigation conference, which was very successful. And now we are working to make the parallel economy more understandable to people and easier to enter.
Well, first of all, let's start with that. Not everybody knows what the parallel economy is. We know what parallel is and we know what economy, but we don't know what that means. So first, try to explain to the audience what is the parallel economy.
Yeah, and that's a very common question. We're very new in this, so if you don't know what the parallel economy is, you shouldn't feel like you're behind the eight ball, because you're not. This is a very new space. So very simply, the parallel economy are just alternatives to major corporations that are incredibly centralized and a little bit monopolistic, right? So everyone, I'm sure, has heard of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin. Those would be considered in the parallel economy, because what you're doing is you're trying to engage in financial transactions away from the mainstream corporate economy, right? So you can actually apply that to various industry types, and you have different demographics of people who are interested or who have been pushed into the parallel economy. For example, you have a lot of people who have been very suspicious or upset about, for example, the actions of the Federal Reserve Bank since the Great Recession in 2008. And they were the first adopters of crypto, Bitcoin, right? Then you had social conservatives towards the end of the Obama, all during Trump and everything, where they felt that they were being constantly hated on and attacked by different marketing campaigns by big companies. And so they thought, hey, why am I spending my hard-earned money at such and such company when their marketing tells me that they actually don't value me? So instead, I want to create or support brands that share my values. So that's a second big group that entered the parallel economy. A third group, which is where we come out of, is from the health freedom movement, right? Where so many millions of Americans were censored, deplatformed, debanked just because of their opinions surrounding one or another of the COVID policies. And I don't have to get into the specifics of that, but just that we as a country in the last few years experienced the first top-down censorship campaign and trying to get people shut off their bank accounts or different B2B services. And we had never experienced anything quite like that in the digital age. Now, I'm sure in the past, like during World War II or World War I or whatever, there may have been different types of that going on. But this was the first time in the digital age where you could express a legal opinion on Facebook and then all of a sudden go to your bank account and find that your bank has decided that they no longer want you as a customer. And so a lot of people during the pandemic were thrown into the parallel economy, not by choice, not because they felt they weren't being marketed to in a way that appealed to their values, but because they had no other option. So now that we have these three big groups, right? And so what we're doing at Replatform is, and these groups have lots of differences with each other, but we're bringing them all together for the first time at a trade show and conference so that we can, A, build a better parallel economy that is, B, more accessible to people who don't even know what it is.
Now, this is different than the underground economy, correct? The underground economy.
Yeah. So this is nothing illegal. So sometimes, and this is a bit confusing for people, before crypto, the most common use of the word parallel economy would be underground economy or the illegal economy, right? So like illegal drug dealing, everything like that. The parallel economy is different. The parallel economy simply means an alternative to a mainstream, corporate, more centralized, more monopolistic good or service, right?
So I have a question, because you mentioned Bitcoin, right? Now, Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
is a huge billion, I don't know if it's trillion, but it's billions and billions of dollars, right? And when you're talking about the parallel economy, most of the times you're talking about smaller businesses, right? And yet Bitcoin is tremendous. So how does Bitcoin, a billion-dollar business, fit in with the parallel economy, which is typically smaller?
Well, the parallel economy, so it is smaller in the sense that it's newer, and so you have the companies that explicitly define themselves as parallel economy are by definition going to be smaller than their established, more mainstream corporate competitors. But it doesn't mean that everything in the parallel economy is necessarily of a smaller valuation, right? So obviously the biggest part of the parallel economy currently is your alternative finance, your crypto, your Bitcoin, right? But also, Bitcoin isn't like a company, right? It's not it's not centralized. So while the total value, it's a commodity in a way, right? So, you could also say that in a sense, gold is a very parallel economy item too, and that has a great total value of it. So it's not exactly apples to apples, right? So one Bitcoin you want to look at more as like a commodity as opposed to like a company or a brand.
Now, your company's what, Replatform?
Yeah, Replatform Vegas.
Okay, so my first question is, I kind of feel like partially this is like a movement, a political movement maybe. And so is that what this is? Is this a political movement? How would you describe it?
For some people, definitely. For some people, like anything, for some, the same thing we saw in tech. When we saw 10, 12, 14 years ago, if you were to go to South by Southwest in 2010, you'd find some people who were there to make money, and you would find some people who genuinely thought they were on some type of spiritual path with these startups. And so from our perspective, there are definitely going to be people who are at our trade show and conference or in the larger parallel economy based on values, based on politics, based on maybe the way that they were treated by a mainstream corporate company. But there's also going to be plenty of people there who are there because they see it as an opportunity. So it's a mixed bag.
So, but your company, Replatform, what is it? A membership platform? Is it a subscription platform?
No, we're producing these in-person events for people to connect, to learn, to exhibit, to network about the parallel economy.
So, do you try to influence legislation?
There are plenty of people who are more influential than us who are on the policy side, right? And there's a wide variety of policies that people in the parallel economy would take. And so we're not particularly interested to try to get into that. We just want to bring people together, create some joy, and spark more innovation and quality in the parallel economy. And we'll leave the politics to other people.
So is the main function then of Replatform to have events?
Yeah. So right now, I mean, we are going to be coming out with a few tech solutions, but what we really want to do is we're of the belief that the innovation that's necessary for the parallel economy is going to be is going to initially develop based on this in-person coming together. And again, I hate to keep harping on this, but we saw this. You see this in every industry, whether it's something that I witnessed when working at Live Nation on the festivals team, or you saw in tech. There is something about bringing together some of the greatest minds and talents in a field over several days. And it's really hard to put into words what gets created, but a lot of really amazing things happen because of that. So I'm a big, and I know that, when we're in the post-pandemic era, everyone's like a little weary. They're like, oh, what's going to happen? But, I'm a big booster for in-person trade show and conferences.
Well, actually, that's a quickie question is, during COVID, everybody was doing Zoom and remote. So, I mean, can you only attend the conference in person, or can you do this by remote?
Well, we are. So we're gonna. So there's a. So you can't attend remote. I mean, that's not. That's not going to be, to be honest, a great experience. But we are definitely going to be broadcasting the educational part of our conference. But again, the most important part is to be on that trade show floor. And so that's what we're really focusing on.
And about how many events do you think you'll have per year?
We're looking at it depends. Right now we are having 2 in March. We think that we could reasonably, within a 3-year time frame, possibly scale up to 5. It really depends on a few things, but I don't think, even on the festivals team at Live Nation, right? We were a massive, Live Nation, the biggest event promoter in the world, and then of course we own Ticketmaster, and with all the venues and data and teams and artists and everything, it actually had to split, even just festivals. We weren't the only festivals team at Live Nation, because you couldn't have like one division or one team do over like maybe 6 a year. It's just for one company, it just becomes, you end up losing a lot of the joy of the event when they get scaled at that level.
Okay, we're going to take a break. You listen to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You listen to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM. Like no other station in the world! Did you know that? Jen, did you know that? Did you know?
Yes, of course I knew that. I told you that. You
Exactly.
heard that from me.
Okay. Anyway, we're back with David. And so people were asking over the intermission, they got a little bit of information about this parallel economy. They weren't too familiar with it, but they wanted to understand. You are a business, right? So how do you bring in
we are. We're
how do you
definitely
bring
a
in
business.
revenue?
Well, we bring revenue through sponsorships, exhibitor fees, and general admission tickets, just ticket sales.
And how do you get the word out?
Well, we have quite a few people in our movement, so we market through influencers, through our own, we have email lists, we have social media. It's a broad marketing strategy.
Do you do any advertising on the internet, like PPC and Facebook advertising? Or?
So we don't. We found that what our market is craving is authenticity. So what we do is we create a lot of our own content, and we find that that's more that catches our customers or potential customers. And I'm going to repeat a word I used, in a more authentic way that calls to them. Because the parallel economy, if we take out crypto, is still so young that it's not really something that, for instance, talking about the parallel economy is less important than talking about the companies and brands within the parallel economy. So the way that you can sort of view Replatform Vegas is, think of us as like a B2B service for companies in the parallel economy. And so our advertising and our marketing strategy is going to be very different, because our primary goal is to get companies to realize the value of getting into the parallel economy and then pushing out those companies, right? So we don't want to get too meta in the advertising, because frankly the space isn't there yet.
But you have to have a certain amount of advertising budget, because, to bring in the email, even to send out emails to people, you have to build a list, right?
Sure. We do, and we're very targeted about that, and we do have various campaigns that are both national, regional, and then obviously local to the Las Vegas area. I don't want to mention some of your competitors, so I won't name drop them. But, so it is. It's just more that we are looking for decision makers, right? And that, whether it's someone who has a company with, 50 employees, whether it's a startup company that's just received their first round of funding, or whether it's someone who just has an idea that they were accidentally canceled by their bank or their Stripe account or whatever. And they're like, you know what? I could make an app or a product that would solve this problem I'm having, but I just have an idea and I don't know what to do with this idea. Come to Replatform Vegas and we can show you what to do. So it's not necessarily something that, if you're, working some office job in, San Bernardino, and, you're just consuming regularly. To be honest, I don't know that this would be the conference for you. The people who want to come to our conference are people who realize that the current American economy isn't working for them, that there are real problems with it, and if we don't change things, it's going to get really, really bad, right? And frankly, I don't know if the majority of people in America are there yet. And so we're not going to, frankly, waste our precious advertising dollars trying to do this, broad net over the ocean, right? We know where our fish are, and they're swimming to us. And so it's that type of play.
And if you can tell me, you may not be able to tell me, how many subscribers do you have, or people on your
So we don't have subscribers. We have, we're not a subscription-based service, though there is a potential tech solution, so we may get there. So we are basically projecting 2,000 attendees, and I'm going to give you a broad range here, anywhere from 100 to 180 exhibitors, and probably about probably 18 sponsors, including, I don't know, do you know Gab Pay or the Parallel Card? Have you talked to Dan Eddy yet? He's a great guy who's setting up alternative payment systems.
I mean,
Anyway.
I have Cash App. That's about as far as I've gone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you should look at the Parallel Card and Gab Pay, or at least have Dan Eddy on. He's, a lot of people are having problems with some of these more larger payment apps, but it's companies like that are sponsoring our conference. So
I'm still. We discussed it, but I'm still a little confused. That's a lot of people, right? So how do you get? First of all, you started what, 2 years ago? How many years ago did you start?
We started. So we're actually a new startup. We started up. We incorporated in June this year, but our team, we've been working together since August of 2021. Like I said, on the Defeat the Mandates rallies and COVID litigation. So.
Right, but that's 2 years, and to have that many exhibitors, okay? I mean, listen, if I wanted to have a conference tomorrow, unless I spend a lot of money in advertising, okay, or I have a list of people that are on my email list, it is not so simple to just create something like that and get that many people. So I'm just trying to, and some of our listeners.
So this is where I'll touch back into something you previously asked. So, our work in Defeat the Mandates, we were able to work with a lot of people and a lot of companies that were at the company level fighting the mandates. So that gave us a pretty large group of businesses, mainly small, but not all, and allies and, frankly, friends of the things we were doing. So we've been very lucky that we've been able to pull from this core of, you can call it the health freedom movement, but it includes more than companies that are selling health products. When we were the first group to create a way out of the mandates for so many companies. And we're very grateful that those companies that we've helped are really eager to participate in this parallel economy trade show and conference. So it's not that we didn't start with a blank page. We obviously started with our existing network of people and companies and entrepreneurs and business people that we had been assisting. Right. And so in a way, yes, you can say, well, since June, July of 2021, but the intensity, it was sort of like being in the trenches with someone, right? It could take you 10 years to get to know someone that you sit next to in a cubicle, right? But if you two are sharing a trench together in a war, you're going to have a much deeper and quicker affinity for each other. And during the mandates and during the pandemic, that's what we were able to build out with a lot of our business allies in our health freedom movement. So we were able to launch from that into the parallel economy. And we're so grateful for all the businesses that, frankly, stood up for freedom and liberty and the ability to not be forced to impose mandates or censorship on their customers, right? We know that a lot of big corporations were more than happy to institute not even just the mandates, but censorship and deplatforming whether it was the government or there was an article in the newspaper. But the really hopeful thing in terms of building out a better economy for America within the parallel economy is there are so many businesses that refuse to do that. There are so many businesses that when, the New York Times or the LA Times did a hit piece, how could you allow some of your customers to say this or believe this? So many businesses in America actually stood up for their customers, and we don't really hear that story very often. We hear the story about the companies who are oh, yep, we're going to ban that person. We're going to kick that person out. We're going to tell that customer they can no longer be our customer. But again, and I'm going to repeat this, so many businesses stood up for our rights, and that's part of the story we're going to tell at Lead Platform. That, like, don't despair. The spirit and the hope that built this country is still there, and it still exists in the business community of this country.
We got to take a break because our sponsor, who pays for our show, is going to be very upset if we don't. So, without any further ado, Jen, go for it.
I think the sponsor would be just pleased. They won't get upset at all. And we want to say thank you to LegalSteps.com. That's Legal Steps with a Z, STEPZ. They kind of let you work at your own pace, which is pretty great. You don't have to make sure that you're at a meeting on Monday evening online when you're trying to run around with your kids or trying to complete your work from your day. You can go at your own pace. Classes are very affordable, less than $150. So if you're trying to start your own business, you're not going to break the bank in terms of trying to get started. All courses are reviewed by an attorney, so they kind of hold your hand through it. If you can't form a business after taking the courses, they're going to do it for you. And this way, you kind of know what you're getting into. You know that you're being guided by a professional. They've got over 30 years experience and knowledge at LegalSteps.com. So you're not just out there on your own, researching on your own. They will guide you, they will help you, and they can get you what you need in terms of trademark, LLC, S corporation. They can do it all for you. So check out LegalSteps.com, LegalStepz.com.
And so basically these are courses of teaching people subjects, is that it?
Yeah, and you can kind of pick and choose and say, okay, this is what I'm interested in, and follow along at your own pace, which is pretty great. Everybody's so busy all the time.
Sounds great. Great to be affiliated with Legal Steps.
Thank you, Legal Steps.
Now, Jen had... Where's the drum roll? You don't have a drum roll?
I know.
Come on.
There we go.
All right. Okay.
That's a long drum roll.
It was a long drum roll.
Well, David, I do want to preface this by saying I don't have any kind of legal knowledge, legal education, business education, but I'm listening to the conversation here today. And the one thing that kind of popped in my head was, so now that we're kind of on the flip side, if you will, of all of the COVID restrictions, they've kind of lightened up a little bit. Do you see that some of your people who are participating with you, are they kind of changing their minds? Has it changed their angle that they want to go for?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. I was just wondering. No, you're fine. I was just wondering if, like, now we're on the flip side of all of the COVID restrictions, for the most part, obviously. Does that change the way that some of your participants are approaching their businesses? Are they kind of changing their angle, if you will?
Yeah. So I want to make it clear, the businesses that are moving into the parallel economy, it's not just a reactive thing, like, oh, I couldn't do X because of the law. And it really actually had relatively little to do with the actual like lockdown or physical restrictions. It is more in response to the censorship, the cancellation, the deplatforming, and debanking that occurred around discussion of these policies, right? Mm-hmm. And once you've rung that bell, it's hard to unring it.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people were frankly frightened and are like, I don't want to work and trade and conduct business, fearful that at any time I could be canceled, not in terms of like some type of social media shaming, but by my bank, right? Or by a supplier or by some B2B service. And that's not necessarily related to whatever, like, physical or health measures that were taken. That was about more around the actual lack of free speech and everything that occurred surrounding the pandemic.
I see.
So, is there something that would trigger a termination for what you have, right? Is it something like, okay, there aren't any more COVID restrictions, right? Freedom has been restored, okay? Is there an end game where, okay, something happens and the movement would go away, or is this something like it doesn't matter?
No,
It can never end.
Basically, the movement only disappears when people have options away from a lot of these monopolistic companies and corporations that are just increasingly controlling every aspect of our lives, right? So I guess to answer your question, the parallel economy only ceases to be the parallel economy when it becomes the normal economy, and then we'll have to find a new name for it or no name for it. But that's going to take a minute. So it certainly won't happen before a conference in March.
And certainly not before the end of this show.
No, sir.
We only have about 15 seconds before we're going to take another break. So I'm going to hold off on my additional questions. We're going to take an early break so we can come back and I can ask you the big, tough questions.
Oh, gosh.
I was just getting you set up. Okay, KHTS 1220, 98.1 FM. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to KHTS 1220 in 98.1 FM, the Ask Brien radio show, spelled with an E. All right, David. So, people want to know how they can do two things. One, how can they register for the next conference in the Horseshoe at Las Vegas in March? How do they do that?
Well, they just go to replatformvegas.com, and they can learn all about it. They can register for tickets to exhibit, as well as reach out and contact us. That's replatformvegas.com.
And what if they want to connect with you? Is there an option to do that?
Yep, we have an option to do that there.
When you say there, you mean at the website to register?
There's a contact, and we filter it. So if you want to leave me individually a message, it will get to me. It's the fastest way to reach out to me.
Okay, that's great. And to all our listeners, and actually to you, David, as well, we are on a podcast version, and that usually comes out about 10 days. Although with the Christmas holidays, it might be a little longer. Engineers are busy, but usually within 10 days out, we have a podcast version. The podcast version has no commercials, and is slightly different. It's about 5 or 10 minutes shorter because we don't have the commercials. But that podcast version will be coming out. It'll be on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you can get a podcast or listen to a podcast, it'll be available. And David, when it does come out, we'll send you a copy with a link, and maybe you can tell people on Ray Platform if they want to listen to it again. Here it is, and here's the link, and so you can share it with the people that are participating in the replatform.com.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
That'd be great. So we have about 2.5 to 3 minutes left. So I wanted to continue on our conversation here. Now, getting back to my last question is if vaccinations are allowed, and people can make their own decisions, whatever. I mean, that's only part of the platform. The parallel economy is completely different. Now, is there anything other than, when you say adoption, are there main things that you want to see adopted? I mean, I think maybe the alternatives like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, that would be a currency issue. What other things besides that, and the vaccinations, whatever, what other things would you like to see happening for your movement?
Yeah, and I do want to make a point. So we're not taking a position on vaccination. So we came out of the Defeat the Mandates movement, and we had people who were vaccinated and unvaccinated. So it's really about, being forced into these things. So, everyone is allowed to have their own opinion on the vaccinated, unvaccinated. But to your direct question, so the things that we want to see adopted is we want to see more decentralized options for American consumers and businesses and decision makers, so that when given an option, they can exercise that, right? So that, you've read all the stuff, how there are 6 companies that control 90% of the media, the banking, And it even goes to something like our meat. Compare the number of meat packers we have 50 years ago to today. It's gone way down. We have, like 5 or 4, right? That's why we're having a lot of food companies at Replatform. We want to provide people, we want to return to them the options as consumers, as businesses, as investors that Americans have always enjoyed, but in the last, few decades has sort of been removed from us.
We don't have much time, but to me, that sounds like you want to get away from federalism and more into republic, which is how the founders originally started this country. Of course, when you have Congress and people in federal government in Washington, D.C. making decisions, it's hard to get to where you're talking about, and hard to believe that we can ever get that low where local governments are going to be making those decisions. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you, David. We appreciate it. We'll have you on again. You're listening to KHTS 1220 and 98.1 FM, The Ask Brien Show. Over and out. Thank you very much, David.